Hey everybody, this is Susan Olson from Action Intel, and I was just reviewing some of the latest data from the USDA federal grain inspections, and thought I would just record my analytics as I'm walking through it myself to share with those out there who might be interested in taking a look with me. So I'm in our Barge AI platform, and you might ask, why does Barge AI have USDA federal grain inspections? It's because that if you look at the grain for export going out of New Orleans, the majority of that comes downstream to New Orleans by barge on the Mississippi River, and so it's a big part of kind of the overall grain flows or overall commodity flows that are transiting on the Mississippi River. So looking at the federal grain inspections report, so we have the last certification date was January the 1st, 2026. So we're looking at data that's been updated today. What you see here are the metric tons by month of commodity, and this is for the entire United States. So we can see that the latest full month here is December 2025. We had just a smattering that was recorded in the grain inspections for January, since the first was last week. But we're going to focus mostly today on what's been happening in the last couple of months. So overall, we can see that similar to what we've seen in the year like 2024, we've seen a little bit of a decrease between November and December in overall exports. If we look at, December as a whole, we can see here that, if we look at last year, for instance, that was roughly at 14 million metric tons. We're, a bit shy of that, close to 13 million metric tons. And then also you can see a pretty big disparity between October of last year and this year. So and what I want to get into today is a little bit more granularity into what's been happening, since there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of what's flowing to China and other countries. And so what I'm going to do to do that is I'm just going to, first of all, let's look, for instance, at soybeans. We can see kind of overall it's been flat from November to December, and that's for all locations combined. But what I'm going to do is just limit this to the New Orleans area. So I'm going to look at the Mississippi River, and really just consider that port, and look at how things have been impacted from a barging perspective. And this includes, if we look at the Mississippi River export region, this includes locations like Destrehan, Convent, Reserve, Ama, that are all throughout, kind of between Port Allen, between Baton Rouge and down to the mouth of passes. So, and then if we just sort of look at that, we can see that, soybeans have been pretty consistent between September and December. But we can see, if we look to last year, that, especially the months of October, November, December, had far more exports in 24 than we had in 25. And from an overall perspective, we've seen a lot more corn going out of New Orleans than we have in those previous years, which just kind of got the overall numbers up. If we want to do a little bit of a deeper dive into what's going on with soybeans, which is kind of what I'm interested to see with all the conversations going on about exports to China. So I'm going to update this selection so we no longer see the different color bars for corn and soybeans and wheat. It'll just be a single bar for soybeans. And if we look here, then if we take this and say, hey, I don't necessarily just want to see soybeans overall, but I'd like to see like where it's going. So I can look at the export destination by top 15 and update these selections. And we'll start to see colors here appear on this bar chart for the different countries where this grain is going to export. So the big yellow bar here at the top is China, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so that we can explore this in more detail together. But you can see certainly, a little bit of exports that were inspected that were on their way to China popping up in November, but a pretty good amount. So we have almost 1 million metric tons that are headed to China from grain that was inspected in December. And so that's definitely different than what we've seen so far in the harvest year from September, October, and November. Certainly, if we look back to 2024, you can see that, October, November, December, we had very large export amounts to China, somewhere between 2.5 and 3 million on these 2 months, and then slightly less in December. So it's certainly not the same type of quantities that we've seen to China in previous years. Also, just interesting that some of this has switched up between the months. So, we had quite a bit of grain going to Europe with Italy, and I think there was some going to Germany in here somewhere. I can't find it in the stack now, but you can see that some of the exports to the EU nations have kind of fallen off in December. Still a reasonable amount going to Germany. Also seeing Egypt, that's been a consistent destination of export, through the harvest season. And then a lot of mix of other smaller exports that are coming into play. But certainly that other has been outweighed by China in December. So yeah, just something to continue to watch. And the federal grain inspections, there's some differences between those and the census in terms of everything they cover. But in terms of what's been inspected for export that's going out of New Orleans, this is a data set to watch.